All right. Welcome everybody. Welcome to our Why Try webinar. My name is Jason Johnson. Very excited for several reasons for our webinar today. I'm excited because I love doing these. I'm also excited because this is a very important topic that we're going to discuss. And then lastly, I'm really excited about the group that we have on. These are colleagues and friends and professionals that I've been able to admire from afar and from up close as we've been able to work together quite a bit on some things. And I'm really looking forward to them being able to tell a little bit about their story. So as I mentioned, my name is Jason Johnson. I represent the Why Try organization. We are who hosts these webinars. We're in I think our 5th year of doing these, and it's just been fun. So organizationally, we're about a 20-year-old organization. Our organization specializes in helping teach the skills and sources of resilience. We have resources that educators and mental health professionals throughout the country and really throughout the world use. And in the process of our organizational journey, we have really ended up in a great position to have a seat at the table as real specialists when it comes to this topic of resilience in all areas, but especially in education. And so these webinars that we started back in 2020 have become a great place to bring educators and mental health professionals and individuals from the world of corrections and really anybody interested in learning more about resilience together and tackle and talk about some of the real pressing issues and ideas that we're dealing with right now. And so today is no exception. Before I get into our subject, let's just talk a little bit about the layout of the webinar. We're running this live, but we are recording it. So for this live portion, we do keep a live chat. So I'm going to ask everybody that's here live with us, if you're willing, go ahead and adjust your chat settings so that you're sharing comments with everyone. The way you do that is if you open up your chat box right above where you would type in a message, it says to, and then there's a little drop down menu. If that says anything other than everyone, then anything you type in the chat likely won't be shared with everybody. It will just go to a group of people, probably just the panelists. So if you're willing to adjust that to everyone, the chat's a great place where ideas can be shared and you can respond live to the discussion that we're having. Go ahead and make that adjustment. And then after you've adjusted it, oh, here's what I want to find out. I think everybody is probably nearing the end of the school year. So type into the chat an emoji that expresses how you are currently feeling as we are approaching the end of the academic school year for many of us. So give us a current, your current emotional state at this time of year. Oh, I love it. See, this captures everything. The emojis are so good. I can relate to them all. And we've got everything. There you go, Adam. Nice.
We all giggle, right? Yeah. Adam.
Oh, I like it, Jeff. Awesome. Thank you. So we are scheduled to go for about an hour today, is the plan. And this is a really important discussion. I know it's a topic that a lot of people are really wrestling with right now, that are trying to figure out solutions. And especially as we wrap up our current academic year and then begin to plan for next year, this is a topic that continues to be brought up to me. So my name's Jason Johnson, as I mentioned. I'm the director of training for Why Try. So I work very closely with education and mental health groups throughout the country. And I always start any training I do off with a little bit of a listening session to learn what is really, what groups are really struggling with. This topic comes up in almost every training that I do as a challenge. The topic and the title that we have for the webinar is this: tackling chronic absenteeism, and then specifically how Tulare County is reengaging students through resilience and relationships. And I'm very thrilled to be able to introduce our panelists to participate in this. So we're highlighting some of the work that Tulare County out of California has done. And I've got three friends and colleagues out of Tulare County to represent and tell a little bit about their story. So for our panelists, I've got Bob Mayo. Bob is the administrator for the Choices program at the Tulare County Office of Education. He spent his professional career working with students in multiple facets of education. Bob was a high school chemistry teacher, assistant principal of activities, finance, supervision, curriculum, instruction. Served then as a high school principal for 9 years before moving to the County Office of Education in 2023. Incredible background that's prepared him well for this. And then I think even since this was written, Bob, some of your duties have expanded a little bit more beyond that. You do a great job at what you do. Thanks so much for making time for us today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Next, we have Renee Solis. Renee is a program facilitator with Choices Prevention Program for Tulare County Office of Education. He has dedicated over 20 years to education, specializing in mental health, suicide prevention, social emotional learning for children and adolescents. Much of his work has focused on supporting underprivileged youth, addressing the unique challenges that they face, and ensuring that they have access to critical resources and emotional support. Renee's extensive experience includes collaborating with school districts and communities to promote mental wellness, provide critical interventions, and implement programs that foster emotional resilience and awareness. Very passionate about making a lasting impact on the well-being of students. Renee, thank you so much for being here. And by the way, all three of you this is at least all three of your second time being on a webinar. And I think, Renee, this might be, are you in the 3-time club? Four?
Three or four. I think so. Something like that.
Is there like a button when we get to 5, like Saturday Night Live?
We're working on it. I think you get in Saturday Night Live world, you get a button, and then I think you get a jacket at in the 5-time club. So we'll have to work on that. Yeah. Welcome back.
You gotta stop recruiting us. That's what's going to happen.
And then last but not least, we have Jeff Lynch. Jeff is the project coordinator there at Tulare County with over 20 years of experience in education, specializing in prevention education. Previously, Jeff worked at Visalia Unified and for Kings County Office of Education, has a passion for helping young people be educated with the dangers of drugs, alcohol, and tobacco, a graduate of UMass Global, and has dedicated his career to helping young people. Jeff, welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Jason.
So with that, I want to get right. Oh, I better introduce myself as well. Jason Johnson, Director of Training and Research for the Y-Try organization. My background is I worked in public ed as a school psychologist in the state of Utah, which is my home state. I worked for the largest school district in our state called Alpine School District, and loved what I did. About 9 years ago, had the opportunity to come really focus on what I was passionate about, which is the topic of resilience at an even broader level. And it's been really, really fun, really rewarding to be able to collaborate around this. So anyway, welcome everybody, and welcome to all our attendees. Let's get into the discussion now, because this is important, and I want to devote as much time as we can to it. Let's start off. Actually, before I ask the first question, the event that really kind of set this in motion, where I invited you to come on, was Tulare County got some really nice recognition. So within the state of California, every year, the superintendent recognizes school attendance review boards that have done an exceptional job, an exemplary job at reducing chronic absenteeism. And in 2025, they announced their exemplary SAR boards. As they do, they recognize 19 boards throughout the state, and of the 19 that were recognized, which represents less than half of the school attendance review boards in the state, of the 19 that were recognized as being exemplary, 2 of those came from Tulare County, which immediately stuck out to me when I saw it. And I thought something's going on there. They're doing something right. And so I reached out and congratulated you, and then said, let's get you on and talk about it, because I think there's a lot of people that would like to learn a little bit about what you're doing and what you've learned along the way. So let's start off. Maybe just give us a little bit of background on the county that you serve. Can somebody tell us, just paint a brief picture of Tulare County, the schools and students that you serve, and some of the challenges you continue to focus on trying to overcome?
Sure. So for those of you that aren't from California, we are not that sunny TV California. We are smack dab in the middle of the state, a 5,000 square mile area, which is made up of 43 different school districts. We're mostly rural. I think with our largest city hub being Visalia, which is probably only 150,000 people or so. At the overall county, we're about 500,000. But we are an ag center, and so there's a lot of agriculture. And so with agriculture, we're also getting a lot of migrant labor and transient workers, and so families coming in and out. And so it's there's always been that challenge that has existed ongoing. But then lately, since you know, and I hate always going back to that time in 2020 when we closed the doors. But that ended up impacting the return of school, and also the return of, you know, and impacted the attendance that schools were experiencing, not just in Tulare County, but I think globally.
Awesome, thank you. So that's a great setup then for where we want to go, because that's kind of mirrors what my experience has been with districts throughout the country. Basically, post 2020, there was something that happened where it was really hard. Absenteeism has always been a challenge, but something seemed to happen there where it began to be increasingly difficult to get the students back. We closed the doors, and then there were a lot of states and districts that never, from an attendance standpoint, recovered back to the level that they were at. And I know California has been no exception. And then it's been this challenge that has persisted. So Tulare was recently recognized by the state for the work that you've done in reducing chronic absenteeism. I'm curious, just to kind of kick off the discussion, what would you say were the key practices or mindset shifts that help you get there? Because it's a thing so many districts talk about, but clearly you recognize something and had to start with some type of shift in approach mindset to it.
Sure, and I probably can't speak to all of the different initiatives that individual school districts have taken, but I think that our county superintendent has made that as far as one of the goals that he works with with our local superintendents, with really how do we go ahead and improve on that attendance factor, and just sharing ideas about that simple, you know, and sometimes it's the simple things. It's that connection, it's that conversation, it's that communication with parents. You know, I think that historically, some of those SARB meetings were typically seen as a punishment or a scolding of the parents, and now it's more of a conversation of here's what resources do you need? How can we help? How can we provide? What are the obstacles and barriers that your child is having in coming to school, or even in the hesitation that you may have as a parent in sending your school? So by restructuring some of those SARB meetings, by expanding the different offerings and making sure that the school districts also know about all of the different support agencies throughout their communities, you know, as well as individual programs and, education components that, you know, that we're bringing to help correct or to help support parents, but also the students in coming to school.
Nice, thank you, Jeff. Renee, anything you care to add to that as far as how you've seen the approach, or what the approach has been to trying to shift perspectives or mindsets around that?
Well, I think at times it's meeting our families, communities where they need us to. It's not a universal one size fits all. Some of it's before school, some's after school, some's it late in the evening, and being flexible to meet them where they're at.
Awesome. So one of the phrases I've heard you use, and I've loved talking with you and just picking all your brains on how you've approached this. One of the phrases that I've heard you use is this term, your presence is your power. And I've heard you use it in conversations you've had with me in a couple different ways, but I think it represents an important big picture message, but I think it represents also some of the individual practices you've been putting into place. Where did that message come from, and how have you used it to connect with your students and your families? And if you're willing, maybe share a little bit about what that has actually, what some of those practices have actually looked like in a real world setting.
Sure. So, and please, Renee, Jeff, hop in at any point. It really started with we applied for and received a grant to help. Specifically, we targeted it for absenteeism. Visalia being one of the largest districts in our area, and I know that I see that we had a Visalia counselor join us. We had conversations with their district office and looked at the attendance rates and tried to find an area where the biggest struggle, where we started to see trends. We started to look at, that fifth grade, and that impact of and actually the elementary school, in general, but specifically, even kind of putting some focus on that fifth grade as they prepare for that jump into middle school. In doing it and trying to come up with some different campaigns. And so as we discussed opportunities from postcard campaigns to that, going back to that old mail, kind of moving away from the constant messages that parents get through the phone or through text and through those apps, of kind of, going back to just a simple postcard that could be addressed to the student, sharing that attendance is important for them. But as we were coming up with the theme, we were just discussing, looking at the Visalia logo. Visalia Unified had a logo that they were kind of using that was talking about, their district, and we noticed it kind of had this superhero vibe. And so through some conversations, we really came up with the coin of what is their superpower, and really it's their presence is their power. And through this has now morphed into, we've just started doing mini resilience rallies with fifth grade students in the elementary schools at Visalia Unified, where the theme is your presence is your power, and working with these 11-year-old students. They're still able to buy into the fun and to the silly skits that we do that have superheroes flying in, and really focusing on that presence is their power. And it's looking at how do we build that resilience amongst our kids? How do we, we all will have opportunities to, or excuses to justify not doing something. And as we get older, that may be, you know, um, not going to work that day, or not going to visit that friend that day, or not doing that, even some of the things that we have those responsibilities to, but that we are the ones that actually control that. And focusing with the students with presence is your power, it's now putting that, we were trying to empower the students that they want to go to school, and for them to be talking to their parent of, no, I need to go to school, this is where I need to be. And so that's where we right now, where we're at as we start doing resilience rallies, focusing on attendance with Visalia Unified.
I love it. I'm gonna dig into those resilience rallies a little bit, because I want to give you the chance to talk a little bit about what those look like, what it takes to pull it off. I'm sure certain some of our attendees are going to be curious about that, but I want to key in a little bit on a couple of the things that you mentioned that maybe it's easy to take for granted, but I think some of the detail would be helpful, because this is stuff everybody's confronting. Like you talked kind of casually mentioned the messaging as part of it, and you've got this old model of phone calls. You know, any of us that are parents get, like, I get that call daily from the district. I have the number saved in my phone. I see it. I don't answer it when it happens. They leave me a message and they say my kid was either tardy or absent, and then we go home and have the conversation. I hear the excuse for my kid. It, in many cases, that messaging is met with either indifference or resistance. It seems like somehow you have flipped the script a little bit on how messaging is being received by families. Is there any, am I reading too much into that, or has there been a concerted effort, and have you been able to change a little bit how parents and families may respond to the messaging about those attendance alerts?
I'm see if they're gonna hop in, but but please, I'm just gonna start just a brief, and then I want you guys to kind of piggyback in. So often when parents get when parents get phone calls home where it's about something negative, instead of really focusing on the positive. I think that's a common excuse that or a common line. Do I have to call your parents, or parents get the phone call when there's just something, an issue at school versus, and I know certain schools are certainly taking different things to change that, but it was, again, as you said, Jason, I have students in school, and so from remind text to sports coaching text to, things get lost. And sometimes I think it's that reminder and going back to perhaps a different way to communicate in something that's colorful and grabs your attention. And so going back to that mail to everybody to share also, and it's not, you must go to school and this is what you have to do and this is your responsibility, but hey, this is what we have at school. We have services that support you. This is important for your child to attend so that they continue to grow. All parents want students to be successful and be reading at grade level, but that only occurs when they come to school and they're there. And so that's why we kind of took that approach. Guys, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think the messaging that needs to happen is messaging from not just the school, but from students. I think the strengthening of that school connectedness and what kids go home with, just what they're talking about. As we get into the resilience rallies, which we'll talk about later, but that experience at a school site, what's going on that they really enjoy, what's going on that they're really meant to take home and communicate to their parents. I think that's a game changer for them, as Bob was saying, wanting to come back to school and having their parents get excited that their kids are excited. That school climate thing is such a big piece of them, having this communication that's going to be beneficial on all levels. It's going to speak to the parents as much as it's going to speak to the students. And so if the only communication they do have is when something's wrong, I mean, we understand, I mean, that's just logical. I think we know that it should be more than that. It's just time and effort. And that's a big deal, depending on the size of the school, size of the district, what's going on. And I know that we have a lot of schools and staff that are overworked, but those things to prioritize and get really on top of will reap benefits on both sides of that. It's in the moment, it's great, and then you're going to see later that it's something that's really going to yield those good things.
Nice. So it sounds like you're really adding intentionality to not just do the classic, here's your alert when something bad happened, when a problem happened, but really trying to capture whatever enthusiasm or excitement exists within your buildings and make sure you're getting that somehow into the homes, communicating that to parents as well. Let's talk a little bit about these resilience rallies. I'm excited for you to share about these. It feels like these have been a little bit of a game changer for you. Tell us about what these resilience rallies are. Specifically, if you could walk us through what they look like, how you came about like doing them, how they started, and talk a little bit about the impact that you've seen from them.
Well, I think it's important to talk about where they started. This was a brand new grant, and we did some pilots in the fall winter that didn't go so well. And I'm probably being real nice when I say not so well, because they weren't good. We knew that they were pilots, went back to the drawing board, and I think Renee can really kind of explain some of this a little bit better, but went back and looked at what was going bad and what was poor about it and how could we improve. So Renee, why don't you jump in?
And actually, before Renee, too, just what, I think that the part that I want to is that so many times events, and Renee, I know Renee's going to talk and walk through the, what the rally looks like fully, but this is not a rally that's there for kids to just sit and listen. This is not somebody standing up and saying, you need to come to school and attendance is your power and you need to go. That's that. And so that was the intent, was how do we make this an interactive, students are involved, students are yelling, students are cheering, students are doing activities, back to the focus of, and where we are causing stress for the kids, but then talking about, do you feel stressed out? Okay, let's talk about why did you continue? Because you had resilience. Same way school is going to be, it's going to sometimes could cause stress, but it's about building that resilience. So Renee, please share.
Yeah, I think it's important. We started with the idea of resiliency for youth, which is a Y-Tri curriculum, something that we wanted to really engage with and put together. And so we and that's more of a small group classroom tier 1, tier 2 type of curriculum. And so when you put it on a very large level, it doesn't translate as well because it's harder to do all of that. Not to mention it can be a little too content heavy. And so I think that's where initially we went wrong. We knew we wanted to be interactive. We knew that would be great, but there is also a level of theatrics from the front that really is going to speak, especially to a 5th grade audience, and that needed to be understood. I think the one size fits all is just something we weren't prepared for because it doesn't, right? And so we had to gear it towards this 5th grade level, and we have some great talented people in our staff that have that kind of talent. And so when we went back to the drawing board, we said, okay, let's redo this in a way that's going to speak to them, and we got it done. And so when we talk about this rally, it's about an hour long. It is a rally, so it's not just an assembly, right? It's a rally where they're going to learn some things, but it's also something that they're going to engage with, right? Like the Y-Tri curriculum or the resiliency for youth. So we have about 3 or 4 different, depending on the size of the group that we're working with, activities where there's going to be some kids that come on stage, they're interacting in a skit, they're interacting on a specific type of activity. We're going to have teachers and administration involved as they can be. And then there's 2 activities where everybody in the room, so if we have 50 to 60 to 100, they're all going to get up and do activities as well. So it's, again, not something you're just going to sit and listen. When we talk about these different resiliency, the parts of the resiliency curriculum that we're utilizing, we're going to continue to integrate the idea of being present, right? So presence is your power is an easy catchphrase for them to learn and to know. And what are we pushing there? The idea of being in the room, attending, that our attendance is important to all of this. And why is it that we can't get to school? Now, we're also talking about 5th graders. And one of the things we have to understand and really get across is that we know that 5th graders don't always have the option of whether or not they're going to school. They're not in charge, right? So if there's something going on in the family, or there's some reason they can't go to school, or somebody's car is not working, we get that. So it's not necessarily that we're putting all the power into a young person's hands. We're just going to continue to push the idea that they're loving school. They love what's happening. They see the vision for the presence being their power. They're having a good time in class or at school or in these rallies. So much so that the message they're sending home to their families is, I really want to be there, which pushes the parent to want to get them to school even more because they understand the value of what's going on. And so these rallies, we were thinking initially it might be an hour and a half or something a little bit longer. One, it just doesn't need to be. It doesn't have to be this overwhelmingly long, drawn out day. It isn't an hour. I would say more like 50 minutes to an hour. But most of that is because we're doing activities. The kids are up doing things. So it's not content heavy in the sense that they have to remember a bunch of stuff. We've also supplemented that with some classroom resources. So if the teacher wants to revisit some of this. We made a poster for them they can put up on their wall so they can see it every day. There's some curriculum that they can go through as well. So it's not just let's kind of just get in there and do this really quickly. We want to make sure that they're equipped with the idea that they can continuously refer to something that these kids were excited about and that they're doing, and that they can have an ongoing conversation about the idea of resilience and being present.
I love it. Let me ask a few follow-up questions. So for people that are trying to envision what this looks like, maybe you could offer some clarification as far as who administers these rallies. It sounds like you're specifically delivering these to fifth graders. So is it like all the fifth graders within a school? What does that look like? And then let's have you respond to those two, and then I've got a couple more follow-up questions on the rallies.
Yeah, so yes, so the entire every fifth grade class would gather in a multi-purpose room in the cafeteria, whatever we have available, and this rally will go on with all of them. Again, sometimes it's we have smaller schools that have 2 fifth grade classes, and then we have other schools that have 4 or 5, and so depending on the sizes, we adjust that, and we have a few different iterations of that rally for that purpose. For us, we have people. No offense to Jeff or I, but we're not necessarily the animated people that we're going to put on stage. We could probably get there if we really tried, but it's not as natural. So we have a few staff members, Bree, who you've met, Jason, who is one of our specialists here, and she's up there very animated, naturally, very charismatic, and Ryan, who's also one of our specialists. So we want to make sure that we don't have to try as hard to get to that relevancy factor. Somebody who's already got that talent to speak to young people. So it isn't, and we've understood that too. It isn't necessarily saying that anybody can get up there and do this. We definitely have to find the right niche for the right young people. But it is about having a good program. And so when we wrote that program, we could insert other people that could get the job done for that. But it's always helpful if you have the talent to put there.
Awesome. And I'm capturing these questions that have come in from some of our attendees that will get those. So thank you for asking the questions. Jeff just responded to the question about the recording. Let me follow up with a couple of the additional questions that have come in. One of them I had written down, and then I think it was it looks like Diana asked one of the same questions I was going to ask, but Lizeth also just asked. So quick question that just came in: how many rallies do you do a year typically?
For this grant, we're serving each school in this school district. This school district has 26 schools, and I think next year is going to 27 schools. And so each school will receive a rally, at least one a year.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the activities. So this is where I think there's a real overlap between the approach you're taking to the rallies and the Y-Try approach. And we've done, full disclosure, I've done a lot of training for Tulare County, and part of the Y-Try approach is very, very heavy in the activity piece. And I know that one of the things we really stress in our model is activities with a purpose. So if we're doing an activity, we always want to be able to draw a purpose out so that it's not doing an activity for fun is great and it fills time and it can recapture focus or energy. But we believe that we can draw a real purpose out of every activity. So kind of a 2-part question for you all. Talk a little bit about the activities, because you said these rallies have been activity-based. Maybe share a little bit about what some of the activities have been. And then I'm wondering if you could also help connect the dots for us. What are the purpose or the skills or sources of resilience that you're specifically trying to connect through with those activities?
Yeah, so So one of the things that we do have a skit that we do, and basically it's about it's a melodramatic skit. So we have a big catchphrases that the entire audience is going to say. We have signs that are going to hold up, and every time you say this word, the entire place is going to recall with this one thing. And so that is this melodrama about being present, getting past is it the river of excuses? There we go. And getting to the places we need to be, getting past the things that may be holding us back. And so that is one of our interactive things. Again, we have about like 6 or 7 students that are going to be participating in that. Not to mention everybody is engaging in the callbacks. Then we do, actually, I think they call it trash ball. And I believe, Jason, you might be familiar with that one. It is a why try. Basically, they're just hitting a piece of trash back and forth from one side to the other. We break the students up into teams. So they actually sit on the floor, broken up into teams. And so we are having them compete against one another. That is a lot of fun. That one specifically is the idea of overcoming things that we don't quite understand on how to deal with, gaining the skills and building them to get to a place where we can now accomplish our goal. Human Tangle, which is another one that is a little bit more difficult. Human Tangle is all about connecting with people and the right people and the ways that we connect with people that's going to be beneficial in the long run. So these are some of those specific activities that, again, we're, like you said, we want to have a purpose behind everything. Nothing is going to be wasted. Time's not wasted. Activity's not wasted. These all need to be a part of something bigger, for sure.
I think part of that is also, because we are, I mean, we're definitely, we're a Y Try organization. I mean, we use Y Try all the time. We're huge fans of it, but I think it's the processing questions. And so while the processing questions they're not necessarily for the kids to individually respond, but to float out there after the activity, for them to then contemplate and think as we talk about then, and then we share what those correct, or the reasons why, or the importance of, or the ability to build resilience, embedded within as we process those activities. So we're using that why try philosophy of an activity that has purpose. I love seeing when kids get stressed out. A lot of times we have them do competition that we bring their staff in or teachers in to, and so there's some of that. So there's humor involved because, their teachers are dressed up in costumes in the skit. Their teachers are involved in playing trash ball against the teams. And so, but it's talking, but at the end we go back to, so, maybe we had some stress or, what did it feel like, when your team was running behind, but then they caught up and, and why did you keep going when you felt behind? Why, well, because that's resilience, and so pulling in those aspects and those community, those components into the conversation is, in a larger audience, we found effective.
Awesome. So essentially you're doing things that you're able to involve essentially the whole group. When it's a skit, they're either a participant or they're watching it. Then you process together as a large group.
And in the skit, they're even participating because they have note cards, and so when all of a sudden a certain word gets said, and I'm trying to think of it, all of a sudden we have a student that holds up the sign that all of the kids then shout out in choral.
Okay, nice.
And so there's different parts. We have different kids going sign, 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 and the kids are having it, and they're laughing and they're giggling, but we're also reinforcing that message.
And by the way, we're going to put up email addresses. I suspect you may get a few emails asking for more detail on these rallies from some of the educators that we have on here. And then from an activity standpoint, again, that model of you do an activity to help connect to a concept. And then after the activity, you process as a group, and the processing involves, how did you feel? What was your experience with this? And then you're trying to connect dots to some skill of resilience, typically. Now, I know, Bob, I think earlier when you and I had talked, you had mentioned that as a county, I believe you had specifically selected resilience as one of the primary skills you needed to teach to directly approach this challenge of attendance and absenteeism. Am I representing that accurate? It feels like there was real intentionality behind the concept of resilience.
And Jason, this is probably why I'm such a advocate of why try is because I think its resilience falls into so many different categories for all of us. And I think in developing that resilience to get through a breakup, that resilience to get out of bed, that resilience to, you know, that there's always obstacles that we're going to face and barriers. And you know, I heard it as a site principal. The comment was, gosh, I just wish kids had grit. I think that was the term when I was a principal, that was the term that all of the teachers, gosh, the kids just need some grit, which really is just the kids need some resilience. They need to not give up on challenges, on whatever it faces, and how do they continue through. And so when we were looking at it, that's where to pull in that resilience is it ties to attendance on this way of there will always be and that's where in the skit they talk about the river of excuses. I don't have clean socks. I don't have, what we can always come up, the dog ate my homework. I just my tummy feels a little bit bad. There's a river of excuses that we can come up with on the reason to avoid something. And it's about building that resilience because everybody knows and all the kids know school is where they should be. School is a place, that's where their friends are. That's where their support systems are, that they all will agree that yes, school is where they belong, but it's just really easy to fall into one of those excuses without that resilience.
Nice. A couple of additional follow-up questions specific to the rallies. We talked about how these are focused specifically on fifth graders. Curious what led you to focus specifically on that age group, and then how does that fit into your larger approach and strategy around resilience? But I'm really intrigued by this as well because it feels like it really justifies your strategy by virtue of the reduction in absenteeism that you've seen and the recognition you got within the state. How did you settle on that fifth grade age group?
Go ahead, Jeff.
We're doing work specifically with sixth graders at a lot of our districts because they are entering middle school. So instead of going after the same age group again, we thought to go younger. And, one of the questions I saw in the chat was, what would you do for younger students K to 3? We would probably do something similar, but just use more elementary activities for the kids because they're so close. But specifically fifth grade for that reason, because we are working with a lot of the sixth graders already through other various grants.
We also noticed upon looking at, because this grant targeted specifically a individual school district, we looked at their attendance over, from previous years. And we did see a trend where attendance started to dip after fourth grade. And so that was also part of the reason. And, and I think it's, when I think about, well, why does that happen? I think it's because kids start finding their voices a little bit more as they start to parent, like, I don't want to go to school today. I think that they're starting to feel a little bit more of those social pressures that maybe they want to avoid. And so we noticed that within the trend of attendance data. Had that trend been mostly our third graders and they had a giant hole in third grade absences, we probably would have adjusted our rallies to hit a younger age. But we did notice that the data did suggest that at the fifth grade, right after fourth grade, so in that fifth grade, that we started to see a decline amongst most of the schools within the districts that we were working in.
I love it. I think it's a really smart example of responding with appropriate intervention based on data to use the classic term data-driven decision making. You saw the data, you responded, and then rather than try to do this big broad catch everything with a single approach, you said let's target this specific blip in the data, and the results seem to justify that you picked the right approach because you've been recognized, and I think the work continues to go forward. And I appreciate, Jeff, I think really wise response. Part of the takeaway for me is any group should be taking a similar approach with data. If you see your dip in 4th grade or 6th grade, then maybe that's where you're starting with your rally approach, if that's what a person wants to do. And then I think there still is a great solution. We're going to talk more about this here in just a little bit, where we can still be trying to offer some of this same benefit to additional grades beyond just that first one we're focusing on according to the data. Let's talk momentarily about the grants. Several people have asked about the grant funding behind this. And this is another thing. I think you all are an exemplary Office of Education in how the wisdom and I think tenacity that you approach grant funding, and you get really creative with how you bring them together. Talk a little bit about how you've used grant funding to support this work.
So currently we have 14 grants that our prevention office is working on. Those grants can be anything from school success to tobacco use prevention education, and we have everything in between there. I saw the questions and I didn't answer them because this was going to come up, I know. But we have everything from federal grants all the way down to local. It just kind of depends. This specific grant is a state grant through Prop 47, the Learning School Success Program, and there's a C in there, and I can't remember what the C stands for. Maybe Renee or Bob can help me. Using these grants and being intentional with our targets instead of doing a whole school, we've seen the benefit of targeting specific groups, and I'll let you guys add in on that.
I think the other part, and yes, this conversation is on the resilience rally. But I think one of the points is we are addressing the entire school age as well. So the postcard campaign, which we're just getting ready to launch, those will be hitting the mail for 14,000 elementary students in Visalia Unified. So they're getting a postcard that's addressed to them and the parent, that has just a thank you for attending school. Attendance is so important, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very colorful, very graphic, but we're sending that out to every single student. That's, I think, K to 6 in the district. And
By the way, do I remember right? Are those hand signed?
they're not, but I think no, they
14,000. That's
14,000.
incredible, though.
And so it's, so we've had to, that type of volume, we have to contract out with, with a different, with a publishing company to be able to help us and support. So that's one of the part that's doing all. And then beginning next year, the one of the other phases that we have is to celebrate those classrooms that have had growth in attendance. And by giving one of those traveling trophies that this school, that this classroom won the trophy because of their attendance. And I know there's always some people saying, yeah, but we want kids to stay home when they're sick. And I understand that, but we still want students to be present when they can be. And so let's recognize that. And so while there's individual classroom celebrations at every single school site, also beginning next year, each school will be celebrated with a banner that hangs on that this school had the highest growth for attendance within their district. So because we want that public celebration, because while our city is 150,000 and there's 23 elementary schools, it's still a small city, meaning you will drive by other elementary schools in your way to the grocery store, because they're all neighborhood elementaries. And so in doing so, maybe it's also that little power of influence of, wow, that school just has great attendance. Maybe I should make sure I send Bobby to school, because so that my school can get that. So that's another component that's built in the grant that'll start next year as well. Also next year, I'll have a team of people that go out and greet parents as they come to school. So there'll be a day of the week that hopefully we get the high school mascot of their school, and we're just waving and just thanking parents and kids for coming to school. And so that'll begin next year as part of this grant, as well as also just trying to help support the schools in providing them a few resources so that when they do have parent events, that they have, you know, the tools available, the literature available. Perhaps it's just the smell of popcorn, and so they need a popcorn machine, you know, to help draw, you know, to, that there's snacks at this event that parents are going to help bridge that and build that connection.
That is awesome. Jeff just generously shared a sample of the postcard in the chat. You can download it. Jeff, are you okay if I share that on my screen here?
Most definitely. I wanted you to see the color of it. It's vibrant. It's supposed to stand out.
Look at that. That's a great piece of messaging. So every student's family in the county will get mailed that. Is that accurate?
By Visalia Unified, the district that we're working with right now. We're working
Got
to
it.
expand it throughout the county, but yes.
And it's translated in Spanish as well. So they'll get both English and Spanish.
That's really cool. And that you can, to our attendees, you can download that from that link Jeff shared in the chat. I want to hear a little bit, I think we have time. There's an important part of this story that I think would be easy to lose without drawing a little bit of attention to it. And this is a weird thing to draw attention to. But you mentioned earlier that your first attempt at this did not go as successfully as you would have hoped. And you had the wisdom to recognize that, and that's really hard sometimes as educators to do our own self-assessment and go, oh, this is not working the way I'd hoped. Somehow you had the wisdom and wherewithal to recognize that and then to make some changes. Could you just talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's really easy sometimes as the grownups to try something. If it doesn't work, discouragement kicks in, and then we kind of fall back to what we've been doing. What did it take to get from unsuccessful attempt one to not giving up and getting to a successful version that you now have schools coming to you and saying, when can you come do this for us?
Well, I think I think sometimes, I mean, because it is a humbling experience to be like, oh, geez, we're usually decently good at a lot of things, and then we're not good at that. And so I think it was the identification of understanding what it is that we were wanting, and obviously what's speaking to the young people. I mean, if we come in and majority for a long time of our programming was aimed at junior high and high school, this isn't just not going to translate well to elementary. And I think that was just an identification that we needed to make a little bit more specifically. And not even just sixth grade, because we have things for sixth grade, but that's at a tier 2 level, not a tier 1. And even more so when you get into elementary, it just changes things. And so we had to be very realistic about what we knew we didn't know, and about that, how to address it there specifically. And so that was good. I think it's important to not just understand that we have a good curriculum, because we had a great curriculum and a great thing that we wanted to get across, but all the ways that we needed to get it across. The relevancy part of, we're not selling anything, but the relevancy part of the Y-Tribe model is really extremely important. Obviously, it has to be relevant, or it's just not going to make any sense to anybody. And so we had to come up. We had to revisit that, because it's not that we weren't trying to be empathetic to what was going on and really see things from their point of view. We just didn't understand what all the pieces that need to be implemented to make this type of program work for them. It's not that we don't know how to work with kids, because we do that very well, but this is a different type of program where we wanted to get very specific things across. And so all the different pieces, we just had to find the right recipe to put in there, right? So we want all these same pieces. We just needed a little bit more of this and a little bit less of that. And addressing that was good. Again, getting a lot of different eyes on it, and then getting very specific people to make the calls on the different pieces that were best. Does that make sense? And so we're not just necessarily saying, all right, we need to make sure it has all these things. What is the best way to get this across, and what piece of this looked the worst, right? Really being very specifically critical of ourselves and saying why, not just this was bad. What was bad? Because we know we have talented people. We know that we have kids that really enjoy our programming normally. What are the pieces that really just didn't work? And addressing that and adjusting them. And I think especially as adults, or even people who work with upper age students more, we have so much information that we want to engage them with, and content, and that's not going to work. We need them to understand a specific well, presence is your power. We need them to understand this as a concept. We need them to get that, and how do I implement the idea of being resilient in different situations? And honestly, that's all activity based. That's not education in the sense that we're just giving them more information that they're going to comprehend and take with them. If you're too content heavy, it's just not going to work. And so even though we had activities, even though we had very similar pieces that we do right now, we just adjusted them differently. And I think the idea of that recipe is different. We are having too much of this and not enough of that. So everything we were doing was right. It just needed to be adjusted in the ways that we were trying to implement it.
Yeah, Jason, I think it's about us being resilient too, and our staff. The gentleman, one of the individuals that we had doing it, he had more of a high school background. And so the first, but he's also self-reflective. And when he came back from this, he's like, they're horrible. I mean, and I'm a little embarrassed to say, there was a brief moment that even the district said, I don't know if this is a good idea, guys. It's not making the impact and so we had somebody else that works in a different grant who had worked primarily with fifth graders and sixth graders when she was at our camp, but she also does Y-Try lessons in a different grant for the younger grades, and we're like, we need to pull her in, and she made the components grade appropriate. She made it age appropriate for them and age accessible. Where instead of, my high school guy who just wants to provide a lot of information and just assume that she was like, no, if we're going to, I mean, even simple things like grouping up and getting into groups and, the organization aspects, when you're doing these activities with a large group, she's familiar with giving very clear, simple directions, step by step, follow me, don't go, but and that added to it. But we did have, I think we've tried to develop something in our office that we always want to improve and to look at and go, gosh. And so, yes, I mean, I'm glad that we had somebody that was reflective and said, no, I need help.
That's awesome. And it speaks a lot to the culture that you've created amongst leadership and faculty to be able to create a space where people feel safe doing that, because it's one of the hardest things as a professional is to feel the discouragement of a thing you put your heart into and see it doesn't work the way you wanted. And it says a lot that you didn't give up. You made adjustments. You found something really successful. A couple things. We're going to probably go about 5 to 7 minutes past the hour, if that's all right. Bob shared this poster with me. I'll let everybody see it. This is one of the posters that you've used. But while I've got that up, if you want to speak to the poster a little bit, but a couple questions have come up about plans for secondary, because we have some people that work in secondary space. I know you have some next step ideas for what you want to do. Could you speak a little bit to what some of your next steps are going to be, and if any of those specifically apply to secondary settings? How are you viewing and approaching that?
Renee, you want to share what you're doing with Mid-County? That would be, a good deal to share about that.
Well, yeah. So because we are a program that works in different grants, I mean, specifically, this grant doesn't go past this fifth grade level. However, we have other grants where we're working, utilizing Y-Try and resiliency for youth. At that level, at high school and junior high, we have utilized the Y-Try curriculum probably the most, and resiliency for youth right now, using the 4 different resiliencies and what I found working this year and last year with Mid-County, which is our county court school. All those students there are on probation, and then work with JDF, which is our juvenile detention facility. The resiliency for youth is an easier curriculum to walk through with them. And so it really does implement well on that level. But we don't have any programming right now that is at a tier 1 level for high school. We know that we can implement some of these things there. We do have other schools that are implementing Y-Try in their day-to-day. So they actually have a class period that is that. But yeah, so we don't have any specific things to that. But what we're doing at Mid County, what Jeff was talking about, is we have both in the spring and in the fall gone through the social emotional learning curriculum at a tier 1 level in their school, where we're again going in once a week for an hour. We're utilizing these curriculums of resilience to talk to them about what's next. Everybody's always been very, very receptive to it. These conversations at these schools with these kids that might be a little bit harder to work with in general have been thriving with these types of conversations and these activities. They really have grabbed a hold of that curriculum very easily, because these, again, especially when you show them a video or you do an activity that is going to start, like as Bob mentioned, bring out or evoke emotion just from seeing it or doing it. It's a very easy step to the conversation of what's going on in their life. It's because you've already stimulated that emotion.
So essentially, you're taking targeted groups and doing activity-based interaction to teach skills of resilience. You're just not doing it in like the rally setting.
No, not at this point. We don't.
And that's something that actually Bob and I were talking about this morning, about a peer-to-peer model and looking at that for future, but we haven't got there yet because this grant was specifically for the younger kiddos.
Nice. Any other thoughts on next steps or what you're going to be focusing on building towards going into next year?
Sure. So, and as I mentioned, initially it's really pushing that postcard campaign, and doing our individual morning greetings and having teams go out and just thank parents at the schools. We're always looking to expand our toolbox and offerings, regarding this, and so it is something that we're trying to look at, initially, again, and maybe the first presentation and the first version would have been more successful at the high school level, versus, what we needed to adapt for the younger ages. So that's really, we want to just take on those. We want to help the schools have, we're starting to look at ways to also that we can support parental attendance at school events. And so, that's what we're going to be starting to dive into a little bit. And I think we're optimistic that just having somebody thank them from bringing their kids to school and to be there may pay dividends.
So basically okay, I like it. That makes a lot of sense. What recommendations, and if it's all right, I'm going to put up your contact information while we talk through this, because we're getting near the end. What recommendation would you give somebody that's just looking, maybe they don't have the support of leadership or district or county support that others feel like they do? What's something you would recommend as a starting point to any educator that's just really trying to make a difference where they're at? Where could they start now, towards slowly building towards a more complete model? I'll let you choose the order you want to respond to that in.
Yeah, I'll just, part of it was, I would say, is that we and this is the beauty of Y-Try, is that it's because of the activity base and then those processing questions, that's really making the impact. So if we can, create a situation where their anxiety is increasing, a little bit of stress goes into it, and then talking about how do we work through that, and how did, there was resilience that kept you going through it. And I think it's those types of teachable moments that happen, besides just standing and saying, you need to get here to school, you need to get attendance, you need to be here. And certainly there are systems that can go in place. A lot of our high schools have gone to a 94% attendance requirement for graduation. But I think it's that connection. And if we're really that champion for the kids, having that conversation with them, that's not just a scolding, but it's just really relating the importance of their presence, and that presence really is their power.
Nice. Jeff, Renee, any additional thoughts? Okay, you've been
Bob did a good job of summing that up.
you've been very generous with sharing your model. And I love talking with people, and it's funny you talk about how you kind of made this superhero theme, because that's always a way I like to describe people. Like, I see them and I feel like I've got a pretty good feel for figuring out what each person's superpower is, and everybody's got a superpower. And I think you're a great example of combining some very different superpowers together to make a really complete model that's really making a difference there. You've got a great administrative and visionary superpower. You've got a superpower of bringing together grants and money in a very creative way, one of the most effective ways I've seen in the country. You've got a superpower of direct delivery of services, and a unique ability to empathize with students and connect concepts to skills of resilience. And it's really fun to watch and feel really grateful to be a part of it. And thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about your model and these rallies. I think a lot of people have hopefully taken some great ideas from this, and there's a lot to think about going into the summer, and how we want to focus on this coming back into next year, because it's a challenge that's not going anywhere. One thing I always like to end with, I always like to end on a real strong message of hope. And this has been a very, very hope building discussion in general, but just tell me one thing right now that's giving you hope in the world of education, as a professional educator. I'm going to pick the order on this one. Let's go Bob, Jeff, Renee.
I also teach a class for new teachers coming into the profession. And there's still the enthusiasm that we want to champion kids.
Amen. Jeff?
I would say the enthusiasm of the young people that I've gone to some of these rallies, hearing them scream at the top of their lungs in excitement and joy. One of the questions earlier was, would you kick off the year with rallies? Most definitely, and hope that the interest continues. But, being able to go back and then see these kids that are in May still excited and being excited to go transition into the 6th grade, is just heartwarming and makes me want to continue in education.
I love it. My guess would be, if you could clone yourselves, you would set it up so that you could run a welcome back rally for each school. Renee, what's giving you hope right now?
Honestly, I think there's a lot of staff that is just starting to really click in with this post-COVID necessity. They're really getting it on how these kids maybe have adjusted, changed, but they're really starting to be able to find their footing with all of it. And it's really exciting. I see, like I said, administration and teachers that are just getting excited about what's going on and how to engage with young people right now. And that's been really, really cool to see.
Love it. Thank you. And for me, one of the things that gives me hope is seeing groups be successful. I've been out, I've trained on your home turf. You've been out and worked with us, and I know a little bit about the population there, and you've got some real challenges. You have a lot of families that are moving around, that are, I guess the term would be transient to a certain extent. And those are very difficult places to really address and improve attendance. And so it is no small feat what you've been able to do with some very real challenges. And I know that they're not completely unique to you. Everybody's got some level of that, but I think you do have an acuteness of certain challenges that makes it tough. And you're an example of resilience. You keep showing up and doing the work and finding success. And that really, really pumps me up. So I'm really excited to be able to share your story with the people on here and the people that'll watch the recording. Hey, thank you so much. I think we're out of time. A huge round of applause for our friends from Tulare County Office of Education, and huge congratulations for the difference that you're making. We really wish you continued success. And thank you all to our attendees that showed up. Really wish you the best. I hope that you are gearing up for a great summer to recharge your batteries. And I hope that these webinars have given you some great ideas to finish out the year strong and start next year. We've got some exciting ones coming up. We're still going to have a few through June. We hope we'll see you back, even if your district happens to be one that's finishing up soon. You're going to make it. You're going to get across the finish line. Thank you all. Thank you, everybody.